Hey everyone, very nice to be here. I think it's my third time in a row in Athens, so it's always nice to come, and this is a great place. So I'm Mike. I currently run product for AI decision intelligence startup called GaiaLogic, and previously I ran product engineering at companies like Miro, Typeform, Localize, Small PDF, and a few others. And yes, what I will talk about is the Orchestrator PM, or essentially what happened in the last, I would say, 6 to 8 months to the role of a product in a broader sort of AI ecosystem of development, and also how it affects all the other roles, and how can you be successful working with AI products as a product leader, product manager. It's not really about whether AI will replace product managers. We all know AI will replace, to some extent, what product managers do, what designers do. It already replaced, in a lot of companies, the core tasks of engineering, and they were elevated up. And the same thing is happening to product. The same thing is happening to design. So the key question is not, will that role still be there? The question is what that role actually is. What value does it add when everything became dramatically faster, easier, and more automated? From understanding your customer requirements through drafting, analysis, execution, and coordination can be mostly outsourced to AI agents. So what happens afterwards? Well, the product role doesn't disappear, but it becomes different. It becomes much more exposed, and it actually has very different requirements. But before I jump into this, I wanted to share a story from my days at Miro. So how many of you are familiar with Miro? Okay, for those who are not, Miro is essentially a very large SaaS company providing whiteboards as a productivity tool for many people to work, about 600 million in revenue right now, growing. And while I was at Miro, my role was to work on product acceleration suite. Essentially, what AI tools product managers need to work much faster and to accelerate the entire execution from idea to delivery. And as part of this role, obviously, we used the tools that we were building. So I'll tell you a story of actually interacting with this tool, what worked, what didn't, and then tell you a little bit more where it led to. So one of the top 3 most requested features from Miro is to add 3D capabilities to Miro boards. So essentially, you can take any 3D design, whether it's for shoes or for clothing or for the next mouse or a microwave, put it on the Miro board and collaborate with your colleagues, get their feedback, get the feedback from marketing, from sales, from hardware teams to ensure that you can actually build that product. And we used our own voice of customer synthesis tool. And based on that, we identified that over 50 enterprise customers requested a feature like that. 50 might not sound like a lot, but enterprise customers at Miro typically will spend somewhere between 200,000 and maybe 5 million a year with us. So when you multiply that by 50, that's a fairly decent chunk of our revenue that actually goes to these players. And they really, really were very emotional about needing this feature in all the conversations. On top of that, they actually did build a lot of workarounds. So when you look at Miro boards, I sometimes found boards that, for example, had over 500 designs for the next big line of clothing from global clothing manufacturers, from global designers. And it was essentially the teams trying to work around the fact that they didn't have 3D design. So they took pictures from different angles, published them, and you could see that shoe or that pair of underwear from 50 different perspectives, and people could comment. So it really looked like a very serious opportunity. And then what happened is actually a company was available for purchase, for acquisition, that builds 3D design tools that we could incorporate into Miro fairly easy. So it's a relatively quick turnaround. You have about 2 to 3 weeks to decide if you want to spend the 10, 20 million and acquire a company to bring those functionalities. And the first evidence was very strong. I have to say, the leadership, the CEO, the CPTO were all absolutely convinced we should make that transaction. So we used a product called Miro Insights, and it actually really well understood the need. It showed the strength of emotion. It showed that the revenue attached to these customers was very high, and the business impact for them was also very high. It was all backed by evidence, transcripts, actual names of people. We could call them, we could talk to them to confirm. And from all of them, the same signal came in. This is really important. Miro should build it, Miro should buy it. However, AI missed a very important signal. And that signal is also a signal that PMs miss. But when AI brings you all this evidence, your doubt goes down, so you're not really challenging the assumptions that are there. So what did AI actually miss? It actually missed the simple fact that all this feedback came from the end users, not from their bosses or their bosses' bosses who actually pay for this feature. So what we've heard is a lot of users say, yeah, we need it. Absolutely, this is the most important thing for us. But we couldn't really confirm it. We went to 20 accounts to actually confirm it. And instead of trying to understand whether they need it, we already had that validation, the quick question that we started asking is, would they be willing to pay for it? Or the people who are actually requesting it, do they have the budget authority? Do they have the money? And that changed everything. Because even though we heard from the users that they really, really, really need this product, for VPs, it was nice to have. We already get along. Yes, it takes more time. Yes, my team has more to do, but I don't have 40, 50,000 to spend on an extra feature with you. I'd rather spend the 40, 50,000 on something else. So very quickly, we realized that we could spend $10 million to acquire a company, but actually, there would be zero return for us and zero value for the company, and the money would be wasted. So AI wasn't wrong, a very strong signal, but it missed one specific caveat. And this is a quote from one of the people we interviewed, but the quote was more or less the same. People would say, yes, important, yes, improves productivity, yes, we waste time. Maybe I could afford to spend $10 per month per user for this, but definitely not $800 per user per month. That's not going to work for us. So obviously, the acquisition didn't go through. We decided to back away. We decided that if we build it, we'll build it with a much lower effort, and it's going to be more of a free feature, which wouldn't justify this level of investment. But what was really important from this is that AI can give you a very strong signal. That signal can look almost complete. Our Miro Insights analyzes over 500,000 data points when it makes this prediction. It looks at over 200,000 transcripts from conversations with customers, with sales, with customer success managers, with PMs, all the tickets that come in, all the information in online reviews, everything else pointed in one direction. It just missed one caveat. Nobody really wants to pay for it. And that is really the important skills that PMs have to develop. That now we have to be experts at using the tools, but we also cannot trust the tools that we use because the judgment stays with us. In the end, AI wouldn't be accountable if this 10 million deal went through and was a waste of money for the company. Probably the accountable person would be me, and probably I will be looking for a new job as a result of that. So this is an important lesson when you're dealing with AI. So what I will talk today is essentially how you can function in this new world, how you can use AI, and how does the role really change, and what skills you have to develop to be successful with it. So the risk that we have is not that AI replaces us. I have not seen yet AI replacing engineers, truly. I have not seen yet AI replacing designers, truly, and I have not yet seen AI replacing PMs. What I've seen is AI replacing specific PMs, specific engineers, and specific designers, so they are replaced with the ones who actually know how to operate with AI better and provide the right level of judgment on top of that. So what happens when you look at PMs right now? the one thing that happens when you start actually using AI well, and I don't mean just prompting, but for example, you set up Cloud Code, you get a lot of PM skills built for yourself, you connect this to your Notion or your Linear, so all of that is nicely written for you. You can produce 20 PRDs in a day, and they probably look better than any PRD you have written in your entire life. Moreover, you can actually write requirements at the level that you've never written. You can do the SDD requirements or TDD requirements, depending on which model you're working with, and everything would look amazing. The problem that happens is when you start working at this volume and really start operating in that way, is that you're actually stopping to understand what's behind everything that you're building, and you essentially become a hollow PM. And I would say, for me, it almost reminds me of some of the leadership teams I've worked in large companies. They have very strong opinions, they will tell you what needs to happen, but they have actually no idea how the product they are having those strong opinions works on because they don't spend any time to actually understand it. And that's what started to happen to PMs who are essentially delegating everything to AI. So what changed? Well, the role cannot be anymore about what it used to be before. We don't need anyone to push tickets. To be very honest, Cloud Code pushes tickets very well. Codex does this too. In combination with Notion, they write wonderful details. Everyone can follow. There's no reason to worry about coordination, because if you set up your Cloud Code well, when an engineer finishes their work and pushes a PR, your Notion, your Linear is automatically updated. You can set up Codex or Cloud to verify that PR, to check the acceptance criteria. You can literally run the full workflow in dark mode without ever checking that anything works inside. But what also happens with this is mediocrity comes in. And that mediocrity comes in because we are not passing our own judgment, we are not getting in, and at the same time, PMs are actually losing the skills that made them successful in the first place because they delegate these things to AI. So the role changes, and it changes in the same way as it changed for engineers in the past. So in a lot of companies I've worked with, or I did due diligence, or I advised, the same model happened first to engineering. Someone came up with a brilliant idea and said, hey, we actually, by the end of this year, we want 100% of our new code to be written by AI. Great. Wow, we are operating now 5, 6 times faster than we operated before. We have now 10 releases per day, and we used to have 10 releases per month, or maybe even 10 releases per quarter. But what changed is the role of engineer moved very much in front and behind. So a good engineer will spend now a lot of time thinking about the requirements, defining the requirements, building the harness for the AI so the AI follows those requirements very well, and then defines very good gates at the end. So if actually something doesn't match those requirements, it's automatically caught by tests, front-end with Playwright, back-end with a lot of automated tests. It will be caught in code review by other agents, and you have built some guardrails so this work doesn't drift. You add evals on top of that. But PMs have not done it. There are no guardrails for really badly written PRD. You write a bad PRD generated by AI, you get a bad product at the end. But there is no one checking in the middle if that actually doesn't work. So the thing that PMs have to understand right now is that their job is not to write tickets anymore. Their job is really to think in front what is really important to build, why, for whom, when, and really have a strong opinion. And then making sure that whatever comes out actually matches all of that criteria. And if there is any drift, to understand why this drift happened and continue refining this workflow so it always produces the results that are expected. And obviously, with this leverage, you get distance. Meaning you're getting further away from the users, you get further away from actually talking with engineers on a regular basis. You can automatically ship tickets to them, they can automatically pick them up and write code. So a lot of things happen faster, they look better, they are more polished, they are written not in a nicer way, but in some way, there's always lacking a little bit of innovation, a little bit of customer empathy. And the products become boring, they become useless, but also the PMs. They are not anymore the same people that they were before. They are starting to talk like they are 2 levels up. They really don't understand the details of their product because they operate on that level. So this leads essentially to a decay. And that decay happens for 3 reasons. For the first is cognitive depth. If any of you works with 6 to 8 agents coding your work, you know that the speed at which something ships is at least 5 times faster than it was before. I would say that sometimes in a day, I see more work being produced than was done before in a month or even a quarter. At Miro, I think we measured that we now were able to build in 1 week what used to take us 3 months in the engineering team. At the startup that I'm in, I would say it's even faster because there are some things that we've built that I've built previously in previous companies, and I know that it took us 4 or 5 months, and we were ready in 2-3 days, end to end. But essentially, what does it mean for a PM? You have to deal with essentially equivalent of managing 10, 15 products at the same time because of the speed. And that might actually make it impossible for you to really understand what is being built, why it's being built, and how it works. Because of that, because you lack this understanding, you're also starting to lose agency. You stop debating what AI is suggesting because you actually you lack the nuance to understand and debate and argue with AI that the choices are wrong. And then obviously that leads to a situation where really as a PM you're not required over there because the only thing you do is you essentially press a button and make prompts or skills run in a certain order, but you're not really adding much value to what is happening there. So what is happening is when we actually rely on summaries, when we rely on synthesis, when we rely on tell me the 3 most important bullet points around what was built today so I can tell my boss, we essentially erase everything what matters. We erase the raw signals that are coming, and we might miss things because we trust AI, and the AI will miss those things because it looks at things in aggregate. It doesn't look for specific details unless you poke on it. And that's problem number 1. Problem number 2 is that teams stop arguing. You'll actually see the same thing. You'll see 2 engineers, 3 engineers, a PM, and there's no debate. Because everyone trusts what the AI said. Everyone trusts the AI's technical design, everyone trusts the AI's PRD, everyone trusts the AI's prioritization, everyone trusts the AI evaluation. So the human input and judgment and essentially the ability to challenge and change and refine the product disappears from the entire process. So how do we solve for that? It's relatively straightforward. We have to start with the first understanding. And I think that was the most painful thing for me when I started to write and build with AI myself. I used to be able to tell an engineer, hey, this kind of sucks, we should have this kind of authentication, and let's just make sure that there's 2 clicks less because they're unnecessary. And then, magically, a week later, engineer figured out that detail for me, and wonderful result came out. Now, if I say that, I get some really random output. Something will be removed, but probably not what makes sense. Something will be changed, but probably not what I wanted to be changed. So I had to reteach myself to speak in a very detailed, unambiguous ways. The second thing that is important is that tickets as instructions for humans are on purpose written with a certain level of ambiguity. If you're a PM and you work with engineers, you know that if you provide a very, very, very detailed spec, many engineers, A, will get offended, B, will ignore it, because you're essentially removing their ability to think and create it from the process. But with agents, you have to go back to essentially this very old school, almost waterfall way of writing development with extremely detailed specs, because AI won't understand it. So if you ask AI, hey, do we have good signals to make this acquisition? So yes, you have fantastic signals. Do we have good signals that prove that these specific companies have the budget allocated, the buyer is interested, and the internal champion can actually convince them to spend? No, you have zero proofs on that. But AI will not ask itself that question. So you, when you're actually defining your process, you have to build it around being very detailed, very, very challenging, and even in the prompts or in your skills, add extra lines to remove sycophancy, essentially saying, challenge me. I'm often wrong. Assume that I'm wrong. And then tell me what would be better or what I have missed. A good agent spec. A good agent spec essentially has 8 components. And when you look at this, they kind of make sense, and I hope if you're building, you already use them, but I'll just remind of them. First of all, context. An agent really needs to understand why something matters. So for us, in every repo, in every product we are working on, we actually have documents that define who the customer is, how they are buying, why they are buying, what are the sub-use cases, what are the different segments. And I can run skills at the end with synthetic personas to essentially evaluate whether what we are building actually fits with that context. The second thing, write your assumptions, what you currently believe. AI might actually challenge you on them, might actually prove to you that you're wrong, and ask AI to challenge you on them as well. Constraints, obviously what you don't want AI to do, what you want to be avoided. Examples of good and bad output. And I would say this is extremely important across every part of AI work. I've become an expert at recognizing people who started building with cloud code, because almost all UI interfaces look the same. Almost everyone ends up with this sand-like background with shadesy and components and with exactly the same layouts. And you can go from product to product to product, and they all look cool. They look very good. There is nothing wrong with the UI, but they all look the same. And very quickly, they become boring. And you're like, OK, that's just another vibe-coded project with cloud code. Very boring. Let's not go there. So if you want something specific, you need to give it examples, and you don't have to give examples in text. Good examples could be images. Good examples could be websites. Right? You can even use Cloud Chrome extension or Playwright, and the agent can go to these websites, can study them on their own. You can tell what you like about them. It can actually dissect this and create examples for itself. Missing signals checks. You should write what essentially would invalidate your assumptions, so if the agent goes deeper, it actually looks for those on its own. And very important thing, you need to have your evaluations, and your evaluations have to be as hooks. They have to be built so they automatically trigger at the end of a process. I recently worked with an AI company in the legal space, and they're very successful, growing very fast. I think they grew from 0 to 10 million in less than a year and a half. And then they suddenly had a drop in quality. And why that drop in quality happened? They didn't run evaluations at every single release. An engineer released something and didn't think it will affect the entire AI system as it goes across, so decided not to run evaluations. Luckily, a week later, they had schedules evaluations, they ran them, and they saw that the quality of the output dropped 20%. It was a very quick revert. But if you skip evaluations, you will have these situations where your agent who writes contracts for your customers suddenly writes wrong contracts, or make mistakes, or is missing laws and writes a contract in the UK based on the laws in the US, and so on and so on. So evals are absolutely required. And then you have to design your human boundaries. Where do you step in? What do you do? Where human judgment is not delegated and agent is not allowed to do anything on their own. So trust. Trust is also an important thing that requires calibration. Teams often talk about trusting AI, and I find it very weird because we know AI is as biased as humans. It's biased in different ways and misses different things. And it's trying to please you every single time, as we know, and it's going to miss things in the middle if you give them a very long document and so on and so on. So you cannot trust the AI because it will make mistakes. So the model is really to think about what can you trust them more and what can you trust them less. And now start from the very simple thing. If you're building something big, I trust the AI to do a demo. There is a wonderful skill called front-end that you can download for Cloud Code from Codex, and he will build for you 10 different front-ends. And you can go and pick, I like this one, I like this one, I like this one. But I wouldn't trust it to actually implement it on its own. I trust it only to give me choices, so then I'm the human in the loop making the choice. Then you're moving to more automated tasks, where you actually give some supervised autonomy. For me, for example, when I'm building, I fully trust AI to build correctly from the moment I have very detailed requirements broken into very tiny tasks, and one model reviews the other model at the end. There's almost no bugs. You can do evaluations for architecture, you can do evaluations for other elements, but I, for example, don't trust at all user experience. And I also don't trust it not to make shortcuts. And since AI always wants to please you, if you work a lot with it, you'll discover that when AI, for example, context fills up, it will start taking shortcuts. It will rewrite the tests to pass the tests, because what it actually wants to deliver the task you ask it to deliver, and it's not thinking about the long-term consequences of the shortcuts it's taking, because it's just trying to please you. So there are certain elements that you have to understand, and if you build protections around it, you can run the agents autonomously. Then you can move one step further. And this is, for example, if you're using agents to write contracts. You can build a nice sandbox. You can only say, use those free skills. You can block the internet access, so it's not going to go out and do some crazy things. And you can build a very protected environment, and it really, really works well. But still, even if you do that, as an example of this legal company, you have to continuously calibrate. You have to continuously refine and continuously monitor how it works. So you have essentially two elements. On one end, there's the demo. And the demo really proves what's possible. But what's possible very rarely works. And I think anyone who's built sort of the first demos, prototypes, or even the first software with AI knows that it demos very well. The moment you go off the happy path, everything breaks apart. So what's really critical is that you have the evals that you can use across the board end-to-end to make sure that not only the product looks the way it should look and works the way it should work when you use it, but actually it's evaluated against every edge case, against every situation, and in all of those environments performs the way you expect it to perform. But also that changes what the roadmap is, because the roadmap is not anymore just feature. The roadmap should have the features of UC as we had before, but the roadmap also needs to have the elements that actually build this trust infrastructure into the product you're building. Evaluation, logging, review thresholds, rollbacks become really critical, not just software rollbacks, but also AI rollbacks. You need to make sure that it's very clear on what taxonomy is there and it follows exactly that taxonomy. And you also need to make sure that you actually build into your system automated human escalation paths. So even if you let it run on its own, it will stop and call you when there is something that you don't trust it to do and it needs to make a decision on that. So things move. What the new roles are. Well, for product is really owning the intent. It's why we are building it, for whom, why it's going to work, why people would pay. For engineering, it's not anymore about writing really cool algorithms. I know a lot of engineers who are really, really unhappy when they were asked to use AI to write code, because they proud came from being really, really good at building sophisticated algorithms, really good at writing very clean, neat code, and all of that disappeared. And now they are just responsible for architecture and reliability, but that's the new job. And that's really what the engineering team is responsible for. And then designer owns the end experience. Again, you can use AI, AI can evaluate it, AI can tell you if it's accessible, AI can tell you whether it looks nice, although it cannot even tell you whether people who actually land on this page will find the button that they need to find. And that's really where the designer comes in. They need to understand the cognitive load. They need to understand the UX principles that work. So, yes, we are in a situation where this change is happening, but one of really messier tensions is also coming in. Because it's very easy for me to talk about elevating from writing tickets to writing product strategy, or for advanced engineers to talk about elevating from writing code to really being responsible for reliability and architecture. But the question is, where do people develop those skills right now if we outsource them to AI? And to be honest, I've learned everything by either writing code, really bad code, and then correcting it, fixing it, and improving. And as a PM, I've learned, because I wrote some really bad user stories in the beginning that my manager corrected, and I learned from that. Then I wrote some maybe larger PRDs that were not perfect, and the engineers came back and gave me feedback and said, this doesn't work, this is stupid, this clearly is not going to work in the context. Right now, PMs don't really have that opportunity, and I would say probably they will not have that opportunity, because if we look at what's happening in the market, no one is thinking, hey, I need to look 5 years ahead, and I need to develop the next 5 years of PMs. Instead of that, they are looking and saying, hey, Coinbase, maybe we can hire 800 people extra and be even more profitable. Or, and by the way, you can put anyone almost in big tech. They've run massive layoffs and then continue laying off, because they understand that those more junior people don't add much value. AI replaced them. But what they don't understand is that in 5 years' time, there will be no one to hire, because we are not building the next wave of people with the right skills to work. And to be honest, people ask me, what should I do in this place? And I don't really have an answer. At least I don't have organized answer. The right answer probably is, if you want to learn this skill, start a startup on the side and build a product. Cloud Code will help you. You will figure out, you will have similar challenges, you will have to address them. But most likely, you will not be hired without those skills, and you will not get the opportunity to learn those skills in the company. So it's almost become kind of a side project, which probably also explains why there are so many courses that help people very quickly develop those skills that exist outside of the companies. But if there is one thing I would like you to kind of take home from here, is that there are 4 disciplines for the PM of the future. And each of them comes with an important question that you should be asking and that you should be developing your instincts around. The first one is, can you actually interrogate the signal? So if you send the AI, it evaluated all the competitors, analyzed pricing, looked at how great products work, reverse engineered their features, it's actually pretty good at that, and you have all that sense, what kind of questions, what kind of adversarial tactics you should use to actually validate that you can trust what all of this research says. The second thing is calibrating trust. What evidence proves that this works? This is really where we are thinking about the evals, but also doing dogfooding and other tests that you have to build yourself to essentially function well as a PM and continue having this close relationship with the product that is really necessary to bring your own judgment. Number 3 is the engineering intent. You have to really think what the system should be optimized for. AI will optimize it for whatever it wants to optimize unless you define it. And when the AI starts writing, and usually when you write your initial spec, it doesn't know that in the end you plan for this to be used by 100,000 users concurrently. Or it doesn't know that maybe at some point of time, financial institutions will want to use it, so you have to build a completely different layers of security around data for this to work. So that's the next thing. You have to ask yourself, do I really know what we are optimizing for? Do I really understand 3-5 years? Do I have an opinion on that? And then obviously the final thing, protect your judgment. Even if everything looks good, just challenge it for practice. So it becomes a second nature. It's like building a habit. Think of AI as, very good intern, or A very, very productive intern with the encyclopedic knowledge was, I think, Andrei Scarpati's metaphor. Think of it that way. That intern might be very smart, but completely lack experience. How you're going to work with it, how you're going to interrogate it, how you're going to challenge it, what you can build for that problem of their lack of experience to be solved. So there are essentially 6 moves that I would recommend that you embrace as you're operating. And to some extent, the moves land back to the story that I opened it. So hopefully, they will help you better understand sort of what you can do. So first, define what you will not delegate. Each of us has different ideas. Each of us has maybe different areas where we want to develop our judgment. The one thing that I, for example, don't delegate anymore is writing strategy. I still let it write PRDs on my strategy, but the strategy requires me to really think through all the signals on a different level than AI will, and I don't delegate that. What I also don't delegate is actually writing prompts, which sounds very strange because there's so many tools that can optimize the prompts for us, and skills as well. But I realized that even one wrong sentence added by a system that optimizes the prompt for you can completely change where the agent will go. I also don't use the amazing prompt libraries that are out there without reading, verifying, and correcting the prompts myself. So things like superpowers or get shit done, which are now some of the most popular libraries of skills that people use to build products, are fantastic. And I've read every single prompt, and I've adapted them to my workflow, because then I have control and I understand how everything works underneath. Number 2, really think about the signals that you want to delegate. Really think about the questions that you want to ask. For me, it was very simple. I work in B2B SaaS, so it was not just how many customers want it, but also how much money they represent. Right? Obviously, if you're building a mass market product that sells for €5, you will look at this very differently, and those signals might be very different for you. But you have to really think what is important. It's not just pain. For me, it was authority, budget, as absolutely key. And then I can build a system around rescoring it and making sure that never fails. Number 3, and I would also say, will they found it? That's another important question that I would ask. 3, build an evil system for what you are afraid most for your company. If you're a legal company, obviously you're most afraid around the mistakes in contracts. So you build an eval system that on purpose puts a lot of mistakes in the contracts. You build a contract that mixes American and British law. You make a contract where one clause in the first paragraph is conflicting a clause number 94 somewhere deep in the contract, so you make sure that actually everything has been scanned, everything has been verified. You put ambiguous statements that should never be in the legal contract, so you can actually catch them. And on purpose, you essentially think about every failure mode that is important and build a system that should never fail on any of those evaluations if you want trust of your customers and if you want them to work with you. I would say, I like to think, what would embarrass me the most as kind of the choices. Rewrite one AI task that is missing signal checks. Think about what would invalidate the conclusions. Often, you can build that into the system. You can build actually adversarial elements in the system and have, for example, codex challenge code or code challenge codex as well with these kind of questions. 5th, go back on the decisions you made where you trusted with AI and actually look at them again and ask yourself and the team, did we come to the conclusions too fast? Did we trust that evidence? Should we have a conversation? And make it a habit of making that conversation and bringing that conversation as often as possible, because otherwise you'll fall in the habit of essentially trusting everything. I would say 6, once a week. And I would actually say this is not just for PMs, this is for designers, this is even for engineers. Don't rely on synthesized feedback. Just look at a couple of tickets, look at a couple of transcripts, read them word for word, because that's the way you develop empathy for the customer. Not through synthesized things, but actually reading word for word what they said. So that's the end of my presentation. We have, I think, 10 minutes for questions, or maybe 5 minutes for questions. So I'll ask if anyone has any questions at this point.
Great presentation.
Thank you.
At which point on the quality assurance element, where you talk about evaluation, at which point is it better to use humans as opposed to agents?
This is a great question, and I think I will actually use an example from GaiaLogic, because at GaiaLogic what we are actually building is a system that helps you make decisions with high ambiguity and high stakes. A good example would be there is a war in Iran. If you're a petrol company, what should you do a year from now? It's a pretty good question, because I'll be very honest, I don't think anyone knows right now what's going to happen, what Trump will do, when that will be over, when the Hormuz will open. So it's a very tough question. There's no way AI can evaluate it. It can evaluate the structure and say the structure makes sense. But in the end, the only people who can actually say this was the right answer and I really trust it are the people who really understand this problem and can evaluate the problem. Similarly, in the legal space, you, as an engineer or PM, don't have a legal background. You cannot evaluate it. So usually what you do is you do two things. First of all, you hire the experts, and they write for you a set of golden tests. You know, this might be examples of the contracts, this might be examples of questions and answers that you would want in this decision intelligence space, so you can evaluate against that. And that's your first layer of evaluation. But then you still cannot trust it, and in all of those cases, you have to regularly, as a human, at least sample them, read them, and see if there is any drift, if your golden set is actually covering this, because there might be new problems that your golden set was not designed to cover. So I would say for everything where you have not seen that AI can have a very easily and very well evaluated output, you need to do that. Yeah, we have, I think, time. Yeah?
You said before, maybe as an exaggeration, that now we write the PRDs, multiple PRDs in less time.
No, I actually wrote 12 today.
12 today?
Yes. Well, I haven't written a single one, but Claude wrote 12 today for me.
So based on your experience, so far, with any tools that are you using, what is the percentage that you have gained in your company by making the spectrum validation? And for them to be ready to be taken by the engineering team, what is this magic percentage, an average?
I would say right now, I don't trust them when they say they don't have anything to actually challenge. Because usually what happens when they say, no, this is great, I will implement it, is they haven't even read it. They just fed it to the agent. So I actually want them to come back and ask me some questions about it, otherwise it doesn't work. And we always have these conversations. But I would say, if you're asking me how many of them have mistakes, because I actually read all 12 of them, I would say in each of them I find at least one thing to fix. But if you're asking me 3 pages and I find 1, maybe 2 things to fix, that still means my entire work to write that PRD is maybe 20 minutes, maybe half an hour at maximum, with all the fixes for a long PRD, and it used to be probably 2 to 3 days to do the same thing. So you can get to that point, but I also have a very specific workflow. So for example, I have 3 agents that debate every PRD on their own. They challenge it, they test against the repos. We have, I think, 12 repos, so it deployed 6 agents. Each agent goes to 2 different repos, actually checks whether the PRD is complete against the engineering state, and not the engineering state in Notion, which even with everything else are outdated, but as it is today in the moment we are writing the code. And I have another one that actually goes outside, looks at the competitors, and tries to challenge from the competitor side and say, this competitor has this competitor has that, isn't that more important? Then I can look at the traces of that conversation as well and see if I agree with the logic, and actually if that logic is good. And by the way, there's an interesting thing I don't know if most people are aware of, but we have a new law in EU that probably will come into effect this year or next year. Not really clear, because as it is with the EU, they always delay. But the new AI law actually says you cannot make significant decisions that have impact on people or business based on AI unless you have full traceability of the logic of how that decision was made. Which, by the way, I still want to see how that will be enforced. Probably not. But I can tell you when you make a mistake, and that mistake actually impacts people or they are laid off, most likely there will be someone who will come in and say, show me now the traces of how that decision was made, how the logic was made. So even though I generally am not very happy with EU because I feel like it slows down the innovation, I think this is actually a good point because it actually protects us from ourselves. And I've seen too many very happy CEO who got an answer from AI and thought, this is fantastic, let's just do that. So I hope this will actually curb this enthusiasm, and now people will at least ask the AI to explain the logic of the decision, the traces, the sources, and then based on that make a judgment whether they can trust it or not.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're out of time. Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much.